So finally we get to our modeling examples. We'll start by building something really simple, because you cannot build complex models if you haven't built many simple models. Prior to actually recording this tutorial series, I was really thinking deeply how to actually present modeling process. And I think the best thing is for me to model and simply mention the tools I'm using. Okay? Because I think if I, for example, model something and I use a certain tool and try to talk about numbers and the settings I use, and I think it would be a bit complicated. This way I would model and I will tell you, now I'm using, for example, the extrude tool, now I'm using this tool, and that will intuitively guide you to experiment with those tools. And you will see when I mention the, for example, the extrude tool, you will see what can be done with that tool, how it can be applied in real modeling process. Okay, so let's start. When you are modeling something, it's always the best practice to have a reference of that object. It can be a picture. You can, for example, directly look at that object. So now you're most probably looking at the computer screen, computer display. So one of the most basic techniques in polygon modeling is box modeling. That means creating a basic shape, because anything you can see around you has its basic shape. For example, your display is basically a cube, and if you look at your mouse, it's basically a half sphere. If you look at your, I don't know, maybe you have a coffee mug on your table, it's basically a cylinder. So always create that basic shape. Let's create a simple display. So we'll create a cube, and we don't need much segments for this cube, so I'll simply convert it as it is now. And now I'll use my scale tool. I'll use shortcuts from now on, but I will say I'm using this or that tool. Okay? And if I go mute for some reason in the parts of the video, that is probably because I forgot how to talk. Okay? Just kidding. So let's scale this on the z-axis, really just to get a scale, to get basic shape of a wide screen display. Using the move tool, simply move it up a bit. So in the real world, nothing has these sharp edges. There is no surface with that sharp edges unless it is a knife or a scalpel or something like that, which this is not. So let's go to our edge mode. We'll utilize our loop selection tool. So I'll use a shortcut and I will select these two loops of polygons. So now actually we want to go to our polygon modeling layout, since we are modeling, right? Okay, so go to our modeling layout and we'll utilize this bevel tool. As we saw previously, it creates smooth edges. So let me just now zoom a bit and do something. Now we can see it's currently set to linear and we have some sort of a softness, but I think one more subdivision here and we can, for example, change our mode to not concave, I meant Bezier, and now we have a rather smooth transition. We can even try convex for that matter and create one more subdivision. Okay? Beware when you are adding details. The more details you have, it will be much harder to work on. Okay? Let's now you see the extrude tool, the bevel tool is still active, excuse me. So always go to some default tool, for example the move tool. You can go to our faces mode with enter key on our keyboard, which means cycle those modes. Let's select this face. So basically the computer screen has some sort of a plastic box, plastic surrounding, and the actual screen. So let's extrude this a bit to a center so we have a representation of that screen. Okay, so let's extrude this inner, and now we can extrude this in. Okay, so now we have a basic representation of the screen. So we can once again go to our point mode, see, utilize our loop selection tool, and again we will bevel this edge. And if you watch closely, the settings for this tool stay the same. If I just hit apply, I will get exactly the same action as I did on these edges. Okay, my move tool. Now this is pretty basic, but you are getting the picture how to model something. So for example, in face mode I could add a little depth by going to extrude inner. I will simply pull this a bit out. I have some depth in my screen, my display. So this screen would probably have to have a stand. So you can model the stand separately, but you could also model it from this part to make it be a one model. Okay, what I will actually do, I will select my knife tool, I will deselect all, Ctrl Shift A, and I will do a loop cut. Well, why? Well, you'll see. Let me just do it, and I will place it exactly in the middle, 50%. And do that. Maybe I made a mistake. No, I haven't. So 50%, and I will just click and go back to my move tool. So now I have a loop of edges going all the way around. Why is that important? Because if I for some reason delete this edge, so if I hit delete, I will lose geometry. I want this edge to melt, to go away, but to keep this face. So I can do functions melt or this little keyboard shortcut, which is U, Z, okay? And now you can see we have an angle. Angles, I hate angles, you have to hate angles, because this can be problematic. This can create problems if we want to later subdivide our mesh and add more detail. Although this is a flat surface and there will most certainly not be a problem, I advise you always do quads if you can. Use triangle polygons only if necessary. We discussed it. So how can I get that edge back? I can simply undo, but what if I made so many steps and I cannot undo anymore? Well, now you can tell Cinam 4D to convert these angles to real edges. So go functions and here remove angles. So the next thing I want to do is to create a geometry, a polygon which I will extrude the stand. Okay. So for example, if I do extrusion from here, it will be too thin from my point of view. So I would rather do extrusion from somewhere in here. So instead manually cutting another loop here and another one here, I will actually select this loop by UL and I will bevel that loop. Beware, all the settings always stay. So I will go back to the default state, which I can set here by reset values. Okay, so now if I do a bevel and pull, I'll basically split that edge in two. Okay, so let's say I feel somewhere around 20 is enough. Okay, now I have this polygon here which I can extrude. Okay, so let's go to my move tool, face mode. Let's select this polygon, and now you will see we have a bit of problem. If I want to extrude this, I'll run into next problem. So watch now, if I extrude this, this polygon does not go in the direction I want. It always go in the direction where this axis points. Let me undo that. So if I activate my move tool and right click on the axis, I have many options how this axis will be oriented. So if I, for example, set it to object, then I will have a correct direction. Okay, so now I can extrude this the way I want. Oops. To be correct, I won't extrude this the way I want because I always do extrusions in next manner. So I set this offset value here to be 0. And when I hit apply, you think nothing has happened, but this polygon has extruded but stayed on the same place. You see, making mistakes is not a bad thing. It's a way of learning. So now if I go to my move tool, I can move in direction that I want. Okay? Don't actually worry how this looks now. It's not a purpose here to model something to look beautiful, just to let you know how can you utilize these tools to model. Okay, so now I want this bottom of this stand to be flat, and I can do that by either the hard way is to rotate it and try to sort of eyeball it, which is wrong. So let me undo that. I just want to flat out the surface, so I want it to be flat on this y axis, and here if I enter 0 in y size axis, I will flat this polygon now. Okay, so now you get the picture. Now you could extrude this to create a stand. Okay, so for example I will D and I can extrude once more because I will want to create a simple, let's say a variation in geometry. Okay, but you get the picture. Modeling is not hard. Modeling should be fun. Okay, so let's go to our next example, which will be a simple tree. Okay,